Welcome everyone to this space. This is a new talk that just started last week that I'm calling the TLP Talks, Truth, Liberation, Peace Talks. And I think you can all imagine it felt like it was an important time to be able to come together in specific conversation, but also, I guess, because of my all my practice in being a teacher, that this is an ongoing conversation. This is an always conversation that I think has been part of our story of being on this planet. And I feel like having some insight into this journey that's been a forever journey of humans, I know for me, it's helped me gain some insight into current events that are happening. So I felt inspired to want to gather in conversation and to have our various inputs. I'm also just sort of excited that tonight happens to be that we're all a people of color community that is also going to be in conversation. And I feel very grateful to have this space with you all. If we could take just a moment to ground. So this will just be very brief, whatever help is helpful for you. I'll offer that if you'd like to lower your eyes or focus your eyes in your space on something that feels uplifting. And of course, you can also close the eyes. Make note of what you feel is connecting to the ground, what part of the body is connecting to a surface, and then what part of the body is lifting upwards. What's the highest part on your body that reaches up towards the ceiling, towards the sky, towards the cosmos? And then recognize there's all this fascinating energy between those two spaces, the most grounded place, the most uplifted place. Inside this body is a great wisdom that is from our own individual journey and is also from our collective journey. Sometimes I refer to the breath as our greatest teacher and our most accessible expression of our wisdom. So take a few more moments, whatever you feel that you need to help you arrive here in this space. Om. Make note of your next inhale and your next exhale. If your eyes have been closed, you can slowly start to open. See around the space that you're in. All right, and here we are. So tonight is a little bit of a shorter time together because of another event that's that will be happening here in this space. So I'm glad we have time at all together, but just to make note, I'll be keeping track of that. What I'll simply do to get us started is to offer up some thoughts, and then I would love to hear any thoughts from that, or if it takes you in a different direction and you feel like inspired to speak about that thought. How does that sound? Okay. All right, cool. One of the things when I think about the topic of truth, liberation, peace, is I've been thinking about the order that goes in, and it's come from a lot of reading and looking at different things that are available in current literature, as well as some of our yogic philosophy, and just pondering these concepts when I hear people say, I just wish for peace, I just wish for peace. And there's a part of me that I've heard also from other people talk about, but also something within me that wonders, wow, what is that something we can say yet? Like it just feels, I get that we want that, but I almost feel like there's other steps, you know, in terms of the conversation. And that's where I started to understand, well, without having talked about what is the truth of the situation, are we going to have real peace, or is there going to be this illusion of peace just because people are being quieted? As long as you stay quiet, there's peace, you know, that kind of concept. So then where I lead to from there is, okay, if there is able to be, if we are able to establish what is true, can that lead to the liberation of all people who may have been quieted, people who have been marginalized, whose stories haven't been shared, people who have not been able to feel like they're free? And is it from there, then we can actually talk about peace? And then what I've done is the little bit I can do as a yoga teacher to think about truth, satya, liberation, moksha, and peace, shanti, and to break those down in the way that I know how, and to think about, I know there's not an order exactly like that in anything I've studied, but maybe there is. And I think Anjali might be somebody who could share anything. So that's something I'm curious about. And then, so for this evening, the other part of this, because that's sort of the general conversation of these talks, is timing. Is there something about timing of our collective awakening that is able to really help this human story unfold? So I think on one level, timing, Kali Yuga, like there's that timing, but then is it also timing of our individual process? So I just kind of go from those two scales, like, is there any chance there's any way this can be different, or is this just the way the timing of life is right now? We're not able to go in this order of truth, liberation, peace. So we just have to, you know, do what we can. I'm just going to throw that out there as a starting point. And if there's not enough to step in to say anything, I'll keep going with some of those in this line of thoughts that I'm on. So I'll open it up.
Well, I do have something to share because I've been actually writing about it just right now, Mark, before I joined this, because I was working on my newsletter, and something I was writing about is Satya, you know, radical truth telling. And it's interesting that you bring up peace, because one cannot mistake peace for silence. And I think that happens a lot in the yoga community, that people mistake silence for peace. One can be very silent and be really not peaceful, you know, and people can be silenced to maintain oppression, which is what happens a lot in the systems that we are a part of. So really to know that peace comes from actually speaking your truth, and it's not necessarily silence. Silence can be a part of peace, but not necessarily doesn't equate to peace. So that's what's coming up for me. And I was working on, like, I've been really overwhelmed because, you know, I've been sharing on Instagram and about Palestine and Gaza and all of that, and I've been getting a lot of like hate mail and everything. It's been really intense. And I thought, okay, let me wait for a couple more days, and really process some of the stuff before I share, and what are some of the practices that I go to, and how can I be of service to this moment? Because I do think that it requires all of us to do our own role in this. So what is my role? And to know what my role is, one has to be, I think for myself, I can speak that I need some time to process and figure this out, um, rather than add to the noise, because there is so much going on social media as it should be. But also, I don't need to say everything all the time. I can just listen and share things which probably are not being shared, and how to be of service. I think that's what's coming up for me. That silence and peace are not equal. In fact, silence can be very, very harmful, because so many things can be happening under the surface without ever being revealed, which is what has happened. So yeah, it's interesting you bring up Satya, because that's exactly what I was writing about right now.
Such an important topic right now, to try to get there, especially because of social media and how much information can come in all directions. And so one person is going to say this is true, then this person is going to say this is true, and they will hold on to that forever and share that with their families, their generations. And so then, that to me, I'm like, wait a minute, is there something that can be distilled from that is another cohesive understanding of what truth is, versus the bias that comes with binaries. I just wanted to say too, because this is something that I can't help but to feel as a reference point, and that's from the LGBT movement, the main slogan of silence equals death. And I remember how difficult and painful that was for me as somebody who was newly coming out, that it was too scary to speak up. So you just it was easier to stay silent. I mean, even into my 30s, I had already come out, but you get into certain settings and you're just like, you don't get to, you can, fit in. That's another thing of passing. That's actually not available always in certain situations with skin color and whatnot. But that's just something I've always thought of. Is that always true? Silence equals death. And of course, as somebody who does meditate and has an insight practice, sometimes silence is powerful. And like you're saying, Anjali, taking a moment to not have to add to the noise, but taking a moment of silence in that way too. So it's so much about context. And that's what I think I've thought of more than anything in recent situations, is to understand what's going on. It's like there needs to be context. And without that, it gets very confusing. Anyone else have any thoughts that started to come up from that?
Well, I like what both of you are saying. I mean, I think we have, I think all four of us here, somewhat of
five.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I just was saying there are five. Oh, there's five total.
Yes, five of us. But from my Zoom, I could see four. So that's fine. Sorry. But, we have a spiritual perspective to this, right? And as you were saying, I mean, it's context, and we can look at it from an absolute point of view. When you talk about silence, I think that silence beneficial for gaining insights. That there's a difference of what you're talking about there. And I think in the relative context, I think it's actually inviting people to see themselves as whole and self-accept themselves and kind of stand up for themselves. So it's this double-edged sword, right? I think my perspective is that spirituality is here for our human evolution, right? That eventually we can work towards dissolving binary and move towards more of an freedom equaling peace way of living that's more aligned with the absolute truth that we're all familiar with. And I think, that's that's the flavor of what we're talking about in terms of transcendence and why we're here and what we're doing. My perspective is, I like what you were saying, is like, what can we do in each of our roles and paths? And, I think we're always going to have to wrestle with that and take some time out and say that, okay, this is what I've done. I've noticed this. We're using it from the lens of absolute value and saying, okay, we're not going to take sides. We're going to weigh this, what biases have I gotten? And I think that's the wisdom we bring by being on the path and taking more of this neutral observer standpoint and then moving ahead. But I also feel that it's our roles, because we're always going to feel silenced in those rooms where there's a majority of oppression. I think a lot of us with color in some ways have been conditioned, to be that way, or, to follow those rules. It's going to be, I'm sure I'm still going to carry some conditioned behaviors for a couple of years. But I think where I think it's moving towards is, how do we create those, and how do we create more of those environments, spaces, communities, like such as what you're doing, to kind of be more inviting, to be more inclusive, to be more where everybody can live freer. And as we do that, and as we work on just creating acceptance within that, then as more and more people get seen and heard, then that musters up them to kind of create and then move. And, it's a virtuous cycle moving forward. That's where I'm at, because I'm always wrestling with, how do you go up against the big oppression? It's very hard to dismantle. And, do you do it by just this force and attack and everything, which I personally don't believe in? Or do you do it by believing and gathering the strength of acceptance and love, and taking these spiritual values and kind of creating communities? So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Gautam. It brings to mind, and I see Andrea, you're going to jump in. I just have to say this out loud, though. Sometimes I wonder, is it important to take sides in certain moments? If someone has not been able to speak, and then we need to use our privilege and our voice, so that's just something that comes to mind. But feel free to go about that, Andrea, or something you were thinking based on Gautam.
Yeah, no, I think that obviously so much of what you all said has resonated. And I think for myself, the work, I definitely feel like my worth is like person to person. Like, I don't see myself as somebody who wants to be on a platform like trying to face oppression in that way. I think that's sort of what you were talking about, Gautam, is like, being in those rooms that are filled, right? Like, I don't necessarily feel the strength powerfully as a woman of color to stand up and bare my chest. Like, that's just not where I am in my evolution on the spiritual journey that we're on. But as far as I move through the world and I have opportunities to speak with people, with the, 2 Israeli families on my street, helping them to see that I care about you, I care about your children, I want them to be safe, and though we are not having like a real conversation about like the bigger picture, I'm not there to have an argument with them, because I know that thousands and thousands and thousands of people all over, they're suffering right now. Like, all they can see is their suffering, is their fear. Is my family okay? Is are my children going to be okay at school in America? Because this is coming to me. Like, this is affecting me, and that's, one of my neighbors, he was just struck by the fact that this thing that's happening all the way over there in his homeland is having such an impact on his family living on Dolores Street in San Francisco. And I was like, we're all connected. And it sort of like, I could see the shock in his, he doesn't think that way. There is a very much like, this is them and this is us type of mentality that he has. And when I shared, like, we're all connected, of course, we're all going to be impacted in this way. How could we not? You know, people are dying, you know, like people are dying. And he was just like, yeah, you know, I guess, like that's all he could really take from it. But even that moment that I shared with this person who clearly we're not on the same sides at the end of the day. It wasn't about making him understand, you know, why I was right and he was wrong or vice versa. It was about helping him to understand in this path, in this world, we are all connected. And if that's all I could say to him to give him a glimpse of like, oh, then I feel like that's my work, you know, like for some people, I can go deeper into the conversation to have, you know what I mean, to share more about how I'm feeling and how it's impacting me and how it's all part of this crazy system. And if only we could come to conversations from a place of, in this person's lived experience, this is the point where they are in their, you know, we're all at different places on the spectrum of consciousness, right? And so this is where they are today. And if I could just acknowledge that and understand it and perhaps share and help to nudge them in one way or the other, that's not really my role. I don't know if that's my role, you know, like I can model my behavior, my heart, who I care about, what I care about. But beyond that, I'm starting to think that this is why these binaries keep showing up for us, is because we think that we're going to change each other and we never are. It's impossible. It's impossible. All we can change is ourselves, you know? It's all we can change is ourselves. And so I feel like, you know, every time I'm trying to, you know, be the preacher, you know, we're always trying to get people to be better, you know, take better care of yourself, get more rest, all those kind of things. Like, I can't do that, you know, all I can do is model what a well-rested, you know, properly nurtured nervous system looks like in the world, and hope that that has a positive impact on the people around me, you know, make it sexy, like Sonia Renee says. Because you know what? In my yoga teacher training, we talked a lot about enlightenment. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be enlightened. It doesn't sound like talk to me, you know? The people they put up as poster children, MLK, and Mother Teresa, and you know what I mean? I'm just like, look, that sounds like a lot of sacrifice to me. I want to have a little more fun in my life than that, you know? And so these conversations, like this is, I think, how we're getting to it. Like, we don't have to give up everything in ourselves in order to change the world, you know? We have to, you know, change ourselves and then create the world around that.
Yeah. Yeah. And 12 step, you're talking about how modeling, you can only model what a healthy person and peaceful person looks like. And in 12 step, they say attraction, not promotion. So I agree with you, Andrea. Like, really, one of the strongest ways we can spread peace is by modeling it and using attraction, not promotion that way. And so with the 12-step programs with Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, they've been around for quite a while and they only keep growing. So they have like a lasting, if you want to call it peace or a lasting sobriety. So I think for a lasting peace, I agree with your concept that if we model peace and health within ourselves to others, that's going to make a longer lasting, a stronger peace. But the other thing I wanted to say about peace, kind of also not only attraction, not promotion, but some people want world peace, but they don't believe it's possible and they don't believe they have a place in it. And one of the things that we can get out as spiritualists, you know, in yoga and Buddhism, for example, is, well, we already have peace inside of us. It's already there. There's nothing to do to get inner peace. It's there. Now, in spiritual practices, we have practices to tap into that, but you know, that's just basically like a very specialized routine, which isn't you know, it isn't necessary like totally to find inner peace. So that's the two things I would say, is that for the people who want world peace, it's accessible, and to let them know how.
Mhm.
And then to be more informal and have a longer lasting peace, modeling it. And that works with, we have mirror neurons in our brains. So the quickest way to transfer, one of the quickest way to transfer information between humans is through mirror neurons. So if you model what you want to see, it's going to spread faster than if you sit there and give like a long 3-hour speech where people forget half of what you said.
Mhm.
I like these. Good.
But I mean, you know, for it to spread in a timely fashion, I mean, you would have to get a large group of people constantly connecting with larger and larger groups of people, spreading the message of peace. You couldn't just let it sit.
This is sort of where I struggle though, and I think maybe we have a greater potential for that kind of access, but then I think, is this, and maybe that's just how this works, it depends again on context, but there's sometimes in certain spaces and places in the world where this kind of message, I don't know if it's very timely or it's the right, if it's possible, you know, is it more of like the conversation around what's the story here? What's the storyline that's been perpetuated? Because if that just gets swept under and we keep forgetting to focus on satya and focus on what is the underlying part of why this message that is noble to have peace is, we haven't been able to get there yet. Like it's been a message, you know, in the ancient texts. So I just am curious, like I of course that's the destination, but why is there so much difficulty for us to get there in a global way? Just some, you know, I'll put that out there.
I think the ancient texts were written in a different world. They were composed bearing a whole different way of experiencing the world. Though the basic questions for human life is the same thing. We all want to live a life of less suffering. We all want to, you know, be happy, whatever that is. So that is the whole goal. But one cannot just apply those messages or those concepts or those practices without taking into account the systems that have come into place through history, be it capitalism, colonialism, you know, homophobia, like all of that.
White supremacy.
Yeah, colonialism, right? You know, all of that, because those are the things that people did not grapple with. They had their own stuff, like casteism was a big part of the history there. But people, if you were to look at history, you will see that people were always pushing back against power and hierarchy. The scope was different because humanity was lesser. Like we were not as bigger in number now, and we are now, you know, I think we are now witnessing some things which our nervous systems are really not equipped to witness. Like if I look at Instagram now, I'm like devastated at the things that I'm seeing. I don't know how to really regulate. I don't think I have the capacity to see this and then go about my day without like thinking like, oh yeah, it's just like a normal day. And yet here it's a normal day in California, right? So it's this whole dissonance that we are sitting with, like, what is this I'm seeing and what is it that I'm living? My realities are so like freaking far apart from each other. And I'm really struggling with figuring out how to like be true to what is and what I'm seeing. And both are true for whoever is living it. Yes, peace is the ultimate goal, but to go there, we have to really get into the mess. We have to really look at the mess that we have done as a humanity, for each other and with each other. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is that people of color take on the brunt for doing the work, and they have been. I still look at, people who were on the front lines of the civil rights movement, or even before that, to really see what were people doing, how did they look at this, what worked. And I really am looking more and more at creating intentional spaces that can bring people to the middle. I think the people on the absolute fringes of belief systems are lost. Like we can't move that at all. What we can do is really create places where we can get people to talk who are in the middle of things. If you're talking about religion, let's get people who are, for Mark, you were a part of the space that I did, which was talking about Hindu and Muslim in yoga spaces. So to bring those kind of conversations in and then having people connect with each other, I think that's to really humanize each other. I think there's so much of dehumanization that has happened because of the extremes of belief systems. To really humanize each other, we need to come to the middle, and that can, I think, happen only in small spaces. So I don't think it can really happen in large crowded rooms, because then there is one speaker and 100 listeners or 200 listeners. That really is, yeah, it might spark something and then you'll forget it, but then to really create this sort of intimate space where we are listening to each other, looking at each other in the eye and breathing together, I think those are really important things. And I think we have a definite role as people who are in the yoga space or healing space or quote unquote spiritual place. I think we have a definite role to play in the world today. But we have to make it very real. We can get lost. People like us can get lost in the esoteric stuff. This abstract ideal of peace, right? What does that really mean in our everyday life? And what does that really mean in the face of such rampant dehumanization of people and violence, like harm, body harm? So when we have to name it, I think things begin to be true when we start naming it. And we have to name those things. And I think that is not done enough. So when I'm looking at a person of color, when I'm looking at a Black person and talking about racial justice and the injustice, then that's being real rather than saying something which is abstract like peace. Because what's peace for a person of color is different than what for a white person is. So I think naming things are very important, and that can happen only when one feels safe. And I think that's where I'm going to more and more.
I love that. Thank you, Anjali. That's why I honestly, I almost feel like prior to this month ago, my practice was about cultivating my peace, letting that be my message and sending that out, because that's really what I feel like I was taught. But now my practice is truth. Like I want to understand, because if I don't feel there, I can create clarity for a situation, then I don't know. I just don't see another way. And that feels like that's going to be my muddy way to get to peace.
Yeah.
Is to get a better understanding of how did we get here? And I just had these recent thoughts that I'm working on my next writing for my newsletter. I don't probably think I'll include this because I don't feel quite ready, but it's almost something I want to say, convince me that what's happening is the right thing that should be happening. Convince me that killing innocent people is the right path for any kind of solution. If someone can convince me that oppressing another person is going to help you feel better, please help me understand, because I'm not able to put that together. And if somebody can convince me, because I'm open to hearing, so it's something I want to share quickly. I know we only have a few minutes, but this is, oh my goodness, this always happens. There's an article right now in the shared by the New York Times that was actually two women coming together to talk about what's happening with the Israel-Palestine situation. One woman who is a Black woman and really is speaking up for Palestinians, and one woman was a Jewish woman. She might have been Israeli. And they basically saw things very differently, but they were connected through a school. And so they heard about each other's message and said, hey, can we get together and talk? And each of them agreed to do that. They share a little bit about their talk. Both of them said at the end of the talk, they didn't regret having the conversation, but they also would each admit they probably didn't change one another with the way that they were thinking. And then at the end, one of them said, I think it's a moral responsibility to have conversations with opposing values. I think that's the only way in a world that is largely driven by greed. In order to make anything better, we just have to talk.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that. And it was like, that's my intention with creating these spaces. And I want as much diversity in all different ways, because I think, like you said, Anjali, it's going to start to expand the middle space and create some empowerment of that middle space. And that's the middle way, we sort of gesturing to my brother, who's more of a Buddhist practice.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jeff, I think you were going to say something, Steve. Forgot them. Somebody had unmuted.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So I keep going back to 12-step in this conversation. And one of the other things they say is it all started when one alcoholic spoke with another. So I definitely agree with that. And then the other thing is, I think the reason that truth is necessary to have peace is in Buddhism, there's 5 things to consider before speaking. And the first thing is it true? Then the next thing is it helpful? And the next thing is it kind? And then the next thing is it endearing so that the person can hear it? And then I don't know why they put this last, because it really should be first, is it timely?
Beautiful. Gautam, did you want to?
Yeah, I think it comes back to my thing that I grapple with. It's back to the global, universal thing of, levels of consciousness and where we're at as a species and where we're headed, because I think, for you to say, help convince me that you can kill 10,000 people, of course, we're in the same boat. We have this perspective like, God, we would never allow that. But, there are more conscious parts to us than unconscious parts. And we'd never be able to justify something like that. We'd rather come across the table and have days and months and years of negotiations and talks and conferences or resolutions before we pick up a gun and try and take a life. So it's again back to perspective. And I think what Steve said and what you said, I think there's a part of like appreciating differences. And even though if people don't understand, but it's back to how consciousness works, the minute you engage even with somebody who's different, and even Andrea brought that up, is that you evoke something. It kind of, there is back to this message of, you know, what I said yesterday, the power of love. And, you know, this maybe in truth, fact, or just what my mother used to tell me, she would tell me is that there is a energy, that truth, you know, and she would always say, Sacha Dil Se Bolo, which means speak from a clean and pure heart. And there is a vibrancy when you're stepping in higher consciousness or earnesty. You're doing it from that pure place of, you know, being rooted in your values, that creates transformation or dissolves all differences. It has a power to kind of create those shifts, and that's where the magic happens. That's why even like the spiritual texts and everything, when they definitely came around Kali Yuga, so it's not that they were created and we're so far behind. I think we're progressing forward in this time, but it's taken time. But it's the reason why it's taken so much time and will continue to, because it's more of a permanent shift of our evolution and more transformative on a root level.
Yeah, I really feel that. I'm not going to say anything more, just than I really feel that, Gautam.
Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to close with?
No, just I really feel it too. I definitely feel like we are working towards, you know, something really big, and a lot of systems have to really break down for us to see any level of transformation at a societal level. And man, that is going to be really uncomfortable. It's going to be really uncomfortable, and it's going to be uncomfortable for like the powers that be, you know. And so I think that's why it's so, as people who have been brought up with a level of oppression, a level of like sometimes wanting to shrink because we just would rather not be seen type of thing. To watch someone else going through that at such great lengths, to like break other people down, to pick up a gun and take the life, it's really uncomfortable, and it's actually traumatic and triggering and all of that stuff for us to watch, you know. And that's why I feel like people are stepping up and using their voice and that type of stuff in a way we never really have before. But at the same time, it's just part of it is, it's going to take time for things, for this system that is so deeply ingrained in each of us, to break down even our own internalized ways of being, of judgment, and who do they think they are, and why do they get to do this and they don't get to do, you know what I mean? Like all of that still exists even with us, even within ourselves. So it's like, if we're grappling with it, how can we possibly imagine that somebody who's grown up with all the privilege in the world would not be fighting hard to hold on to that privilege, you know? So that's what it is, you know. It's like a tantrum. It's like a 2-year-old who's just like, no, I refuse to let you change this world, because, and you know, they learn and they grow over time with love, and not with spankings, and not with being belittled, and not with hatred, but with love. That's the only way they can learn to get better, you know. So sorry, I said I didn't have anything to say, but then I did.
Well, I think you brought us to a good closing moment. Sometimes I think a little spanking might be okay. No, I don't. A little. Thank you all so much, and I'm grateful for this conversation tonight in this space. And this will be something that will happen weekly. And then also we have our monthly Empower Hour, which is coming up this weekend, and it's going to be something on the topic of grateful to be able to know the truth. It's something around that is what I'm working on. Maybe Anjali, I should talk with you more about that since you're on that topic also. But let's just take a moment. Yes, that's why I want to talk about gratitude, but not just
Gratitude month.
Well, in general, I think isn't it just in general because of
A lot of people also
Thanksgiving.
adopt it as Gratitude Month. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did it IYI. We're like, okay, this month's teaching is gratitude.
Very nice. Well, let's take that all forward. I've got to get going, so it'll be a very brief close, but just thank you all so much for taking some time and sending some good energy out there through this conversation. As I always say, I think the answers are in the conversation, and I hope that we can continue this again. All right.
Thank
Truth,
you.
liberation, peace. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Bye.